Hi, sorry for the awkwardness. This is the best way I knew how to do this presentation and get me plus the presentation in it. But for my econometrics project, I chose to do the business success rates as seen through different Shark Tank pitches. So to begin with a little introduction on this, so in case you don't have any knowledge in economic growth and background, which I'm sure you do, a lot of economic growth is driven by different entrepreneurships and different startups that come into the company and different categories of business and things like that. So economic growth is really driven by young entrepreneurs entering the field of business. One of these really big name things that help different entrepreneurs kind of get a kickstart for these young entrepreneurs looking to be more successful in the business and really launch an enterprise is Shark Tank. If you haven't heard of the show, what Shark Tank is different entrepreneurs come on, they present their ideas, their products, and then from there, there's 5 different sharks, which are people or investors that are interested in different products that can launch them to a new level in an industry. So they offer them a certain amount of material to start with. So like if they need to grow and get better production or whatever it is, and they need a certain amount of money, they offer it, but they also require a stock exchange in return to kind of promote their business and launch them to the next level. So what I thought would be interesting for my econometrics project would be to examine these different pitches and kind of whether they success or failed, and then kind of the different factors that went into their success and fail, whether the show helped and like what part of their venture really played effect into whether they succeeded or failed. So some of the factors specifically that I looked into their valuations, what the company was valued at, different investment offers, and the different categories of like what industry they were in, as well as if there was multiple entrepreneurs involved with one business or if it was a single-led entrepreneur. So I found just a couple articles that told me a little bit more about this, just so I could have a better background knowledge. So one of the things that I really kind of looked at was what determines success in the venture. So venture success was directly determined by the growth of a company, the profitability of a company, the market shares they had, as well as the longevity of a company. So whether they were successful or not was determined upon these factors. And there was a different few theories that were involved in looking at the success of it. So one of them is the RBV theory, or the resource-based theory. So with resource-based theory, that's just making sure that you have the resources needed to make you a very competitive company and give yourselves the competitive advantage. So saying by the resources that they have the capabilities required to create a competitive advantage, meaning that they could sustain that long-term advantage over other companies. Another theory that was discussed that I looked at was the social network theory. So this goes into the different social connections that were developed to help a business contain that competitive advantage to really be successful long-term. And then finally, institutional theory. Institutional theory is kind of the shape of the institution with whether that was a category they were going into or anything like that, kind of determines the outcome of their ventures. So with that being said, let's get into the data a little bit. So with this data and methodology, so the data that I found is a data set that included over 495 inputs. So it included every single company and venture that was on Shark Tank for the first six seasons across 122 episodes. So it's 495 different businesses across those episodes that were put in. Included in this data had the different categories. It included whether they got a deal or not, whether a deal was received, description of the product, the episode it aired, the industry category, the name of the entrepreneur, the location, the website for the product, how much was asked for, what percentage of stock exchange was required, the valuation of the company, the season it aired, the name of the sharks, the title of the episode, and whether the entrepreneurs presented, whether there was multiple entrepreneurs or a single entrepreneur that was with the product. So looking at this, I thought this was plenty of information. So I went through and I looked. There was no missing data points. And then I also determined that some of the information wasn't really needed to look at. So I went ahead and got rid of out of the data. I got rid of the season it aired, the name of the sharks, the description of the product, the title of the episode, and then also got rid of the date that it aired because I didn't see these as being valuable points as to whether a business failed or succeeded. So then kind of looking at that further, I wanted to run a couple tests to just kind of look at which products, which variables determine the success rate or not. So I looked at at my dependent variable being the success of the pitch, whether the business flopped or failed, which was included in the category set as a true or false category. So that was my dependent variable, and then my independent variables were the categories. So that's the industry in which the product that the business was presenting was in. The locations, that was the headquarters where it was founded. I thought this was important because it might have an effect of how many people in that area are using that product. Asked for was how much the money the entrepreneur specifically asked for to get to fund their business. The exchange for stake was the percent of the stake that the stockholders, that the sharks asked for in return. The valuation was how much the overall company was valued at, and then multiple entrepreneurs was whether it had multiple or not. I thought this might be an effect because maybe if you have more help, it might be easier. So I wanted to keep that in as well. So then I went ahead and looked at the data. So mainly the things I wanted to look at was kind of the area of location and see if that played a point. I did notice that all of the successful ventures tend to be in areas of higher population, such as California or New York or like Atlanta, Georgia specifically. I think those high populations played into an effect on whether the business was successful or not. And then looking at it, I also wanted to see how many of the different ventures had multiple partners or not. So the majority of ventures did not have multiple partners, which surprised me. So 67.47 of them were solo endeavors. So that surprised me. And then finally, the other one that I thought was really important was the category. So which area of the market they were going into. So with that specifically, the top three industries of the products were specialty food, novelties, and baby and childcare. So a little bit more about this so you can kind of look at it. So after I did all this, I looked at it, went to those top industries. And then after I looked at all of this, I ran a chi-square test or a chi-square test, not really sure how to pronounce that, for all the non-numerical values to kind of see how they related to everything. And then I did a regression analysis for the numerical values. So to get into this a little bit, this is a little bit harder to see. So I'm going to try to get you a little bit closer. But this was just a account to see which variables had the higher inclusion in the product. So these are the different categories. So like I said before, the specialty food, novelties, and baby and childcare were the most common ones. So this high one right here is 62 different business ventures were in the specialties, 35 was in novelties, and 27 was in childcare, which I thought was really interesting just to see if that number of ventures had any correlation to it. So then I kind of looked at it a little bit. With the categories, I wanted to see whether the category affected the valuation of the company. So if being in a certain business area meant that your business was valued more, and through this, I was actually able to see that it was. So with this, you can kind of look at the valuation. So like right here, this is actually the education category, which really surprised me. Being in the education district wound up valuing your company at a higher product, which I thought was very interesting. So this was one of the correlations that I kind of wanted to see there. When I looked at it, is that you can see that the education was high, as well as the same three categories that we spoke of earlier. And so then once I kind of saw that there was a little bit of a correlation between those individual things with the category, I decided to go through and look to see if the category had a direct relation to whether the business failed or succeeded or not. So that's when we kind of get into this regression analysis. So this is when I went through with all of the different statistics and just looked for the different areas. So this area include how much money was asked for, the exchange for stock, and then the valuation of the company as well. And then whether it had multiple entrepreneurs or not to see whether it was important or not to the dependent variable, which was whether the business succeeded. So through this, I was actually able to find out that the only variable that was considered important to whether the business succeeded or not was actually the exchange for stake. So with this, we had a negative correlation. So you can kind of see right here that it had a negative correlation. The coefficient was a negative 0.00586, which did fall within that range for it to be considered a significant value. When we look at the different p-value, the p-value was 0.0219, so it falls within that range to be significant. So then I wanted to take a look a little bit more into that. So when I did, I kind of found out that the exchange for stake was very important because it kind of shows that it did have a negative correlation, meaning that the more stake that was asked for, the less likely the successful venture was. So with this, it was kind of those three different factors that I kind of thought might play an effect of this. So higher equity demands, meaning that ventures that demand higher stake in exchange might be perceived as riskier. So businesses don't want to take that value in it. And then other was lower negotiation power. So if the entrepreneurs are willing to exchange larger amounts of their stake, there's probably a reason for that. So they don't have as much of the negotiation power. And then finally, there might be some confounding factors. So there might be some hidden things that businesses are trying to keep, which is why they're willing to exchange so much stake in terms of it. So all of these things are also things that lead into a business not succeeding, which was very interesting to me. So that was kind of what I gained from this. So then looking at it, the results were kind of what I just spoke of. So there's significant reason to believe that the category does play directly into the effect on the valuation of a company. So like whatever category they're in might have a specific correlation to what effect it's in. I was surprised to find that education was one of the highest valued. So different businesses that have a stake in education wind up being in the higher values. Then there's also significant reason to believe that the category directly relates to the success of the venture. So depending on which business area they went to, which category they had, potential directly relates to the success of the venture. And then finally, the exchange for stake had a negative correlation between the success of the venture. So like in conclusion, some of the things I thought were most interesting were that the most important factors in the field was the exchange for stake in the company and also which category they went into. And then pretty much overall, just this regression did run that it had a lower R squared, which means that the explanatory value of the model might be a little bit lower. So there are some things to take into effect with that. And one thing that I would really like to look at moving forward was whether entry to the market, so like the timing in which they entered the market, what the market was doing at the time, whether that would play a good variable to include in future research. That would be something I wanted to look into. Thank you.